All right, welcome to Jane Unchained Live Talk. And we today are revealing the one and only Lady Freethinker, Nina Jackal.
Hi,
Hi,
thanks so
how
much
are
for
you?
having me.
Oh, it's such a delight and an honor. When I first started getting your email blasts, I was like, who is Lady Freethinker? She is doing so much. She is doing campaigns. She's doing petitions. It's like, wow, how do you do it all? Why do you do it? Tell us about Lady Freethinker.
Well, how do I not do it all, to be honest? I mean, these things matter so much, and they've always mattered to me. And, the more the news keeps coming out, the more these horror stories are revealed. I think the more important it is to keep sharing it with the world. And that's why I do what I do. Lady Freethinker exists to expose the cruelty that's happening every single day and reach as many people as we can to educate them on the issues, and then also provide a simple way to take action. And that's where the petitions come in. We make it super easy for readers to go to the website, look at a petition, and sign with a single click. And then that makes it simple for them. And then we do the harder part. We gather the signatures, we do the outreach and the campaigning. But with that, that groundswell of support from the readers who have given that click, it's immensely helpful, and it helps us not only educate people but influence policymakers and force them to pay attention, because they realize that 30,000 people have signed a petition, and all of a sudden they have to pay attention because they know that people are watching. So that's really our goal, is to expose the issues and to get the people who have the power to make change see them and know that we care.
It's this easy. Go to ladyfreethinker.org. You can sign up with a click, and then you get an email, and you literally just boom, boom, boom. And in 30 seconds, you've done a huge amount for animals. Because, for example, I was in the news business for almost 40 years. And wow, if there was a petition directed at me, I would be like this, because this is a corporation and you don't want to get in trouble. So it's the same thing with other corporations. If you've ever worked for a big corporation, even one letter, one well-written letter sent to an executive, they call you in, you talk to them, you have to explain yourself. So imagine if you're getting a petition directed at you with 30,000 signatures. It gets your attention. And we all know that in this ADD world of ours, no matter what we say, oh, I'm going to write a letter to so-and-so, we never get around to it. There's just too much going on. The letters are written for you. All you do is click on Lady Freethinker, boom, ladyfreethinker.org. You click on it, you get these emails, and you sign the petitions, lickety split, boom. I do it within 30 seconds of getting your email. It's so easy. And then I feel like I've accomplished something for the day. So way to go. How did you come up with this whole idea?
It's been a slow progression. It started out as just my blog. Basically, I was a journalist, a print journalist, and I really.
Can you tell me about that? Because I'm interested. Because a lot of people, think we're fringe. Well, right now, Jane Unchained News, we have a lawyer who's one of our anchors who just had a show on, Carissa Cran. She's a super lawyer. She's appeared on all sorts of media, all the major cable channels and the networks. I was in mainstream media for 40 years. You are a journalist. Tell us about your background so that people understand that we are people who are just like you. We're doctors, we're lawyers, we're nurses, we're firefighters, we're this, we're that. We're not hanging upside down from a tree somewhere. This is a movement that encompasses all demographics, and we are all rising up together. But tell us about your story.
Well, I studied journalism at UCLA, and my goal was to be, a writer, a reporter for print. Obviously, print is well, the print industry isn't quite what it was when I was studying journalism. Obviously, it changed into the online landscape. But I freelanced for a lot of online newspapers. I wrote for USA Today, Cron.com, a lot of the major outlets, writing articles for them. But as I was doing that, I really wanted to start focusing on the things that mattered the most to me. Animals have always mattered more to me than any other issue. Something that I'm passionate about. I've always grown up with animals, had animals in my life, and they're so dear to me. And it's always just made me physically ill to watch an animal suffer, especially at the hands of humans. And I never felt like there was really a choice. That was something that I had to do something about in the capacity that I could. So using those journalism skills that I'd learned and the experience that I'd gotten, I'd started what was a very small blog. I mean, we're talking, 6 views a day on a good day at the beginning. And that was in 2013. But then from there, I kept at it. I guess I didn't really care that no one was reading because I wanted to write it. And I just kept at it, and then eventually did grow an audience. And the more we grew, the more it turned into a team, and all of a sudden other people were helping with writing. We became a nonprofit 501c3 organization in 2015, and that enabled us to accept donations and to gain more public support to sustain the work that we do. And today, I still do some of the writing, but mainly it's the team, and they do a phenomenal job. I still edit every article. I look at everything that comes out on the site. I own it. I take ownership over what we put out, and I want to make sure that what we're putting out is impactful and effective, and can gain as large an audience as possible to expose people to these issues. And beyond the publishing now, we also provide direct aid to animal rescuers. While we don't do rescue ourselves, possibly in the future, but right now that's not our focus, and we don't really have the capacity. But what we do is we partner with other rescuers on the ground, like Save Korean Dogs in Korea. They're saving dogs from the dog meat trade. There are a couple of groups in China that we work with. And provide, food, medicine, shelter, heat in the winter, things that they need to save the lives of these dogs and to make sure that they're well taken care of.
Well, I'm going to show a couple of headlines from this week while you share it out to your page, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
One thing that is happening now is Americans are looking at factory farming and slaughterhouses differently. And this was an ad that PETA put in the Washington Post, and similar ads in other major newspapers, the predominant key newspapers of our nation. And it says, America, it's time to move away from meat. And that is as headlines have come up showing the horrific conditions of workers as they face COVID-19. One of the hot spots of COVID-19 is slaughterhouses, along with prisons and nursing homes. It's the 3 hot spots in the United States. And so as we then start looking at these slaughterhouses, headlines come up like this. Investigative reporters going in there, finding out horrific things like poultry workers are denied bathroom breaks and have to wear diapers.
Wow.
Is that, first of all, it's the most unappetizing thing I've ever heard. But that to me says, wow, this is a reprehensible industry that really doesn't value people. And additionally, you have the whole issue of, I'll get to a better banner here, the Trump administration basically saying, well, if they get coronavirus in the meatpacking plants, it's their fault. It's not that they're being sent to their deaths to make a product that nobody needs, that in fact is bad for our health and horrible for climate. It's their fault. It's their lifestyle, which of course the overwhelming majority of meatpacking workers and slaughterhouse workers are immigrants. I talked to one union leader that they speak 30 languages in one slaughterhouse. So now that the coronavirus has invaded the White House, I wonder if we should ask, is it their lifestyle? Is it Donald Trump's lifestyle? Is it Melania's lifestyle? Is it Ivanka's lifestyle that is causing COVID-19? Do you see how people would say, well, that's not fair? Well, why is it fair to say it's the workers' lifestyle? They weren't dying of COVID-19 before COVID-19. And the union leader who was just outraged by that said it on major networks. Hey, they weren't dying. Now that there are thousands of meat packing workers who have COVID-19, and there are quite a few who are sick, and there are, in one slaughterhouse alone, 7 deaths. I believe it's more than 20, or at least 20 right now. So we are sending people in to die because the Trump administration has said now that this is essential work, which of course it's not.
Right.
And we're saying, we like bacon. So you go in there and you kill those animals that we don't have the courage to kill, so we can have bacon and call ourselves animal lovers because we have a dog, and you can die a horrible death. And that's okay because you're immigrants and we don't care. That's essentially what's happening right now.
It is. And it's so sad that is the case very often. The poor, the immigrants, they get blamed for the problems that we inflict on them. We, meaning the upper class, the people with the power. Not me personally, because I'm not one of those people. But people like Trump, like people in the White House, it's very easy for them to blame the people without the power, the people without the voice to defend themselves, even, really, because they're not getting the airtime. They're not getting the same sort of outreach and platforms. So it's hard for them to argue. I was actually just reading today that now there's a meat plant in Germany that's having the same issue. There are hundreds of people who have tested positive. These are also migrant workers. They're migrants from Eastern Europe, Romania, and places like that. And they are so helpless. They live together. They're bused to work in the same bus. So basically, if one of these workers gets coronavirus, everyone who works with them, who's sharing the bus home and living in the same quarters, is susceptible to. Clearly, these are conditions that were imposed upon them and not their fault. And just as in the United States, these people didn't come here saying, I want to be a slaughterhouse worker. I want to kill animals for a living. I want to work in the meat industry in these horrendous conditions. Nobody said that. They're forced into these conditions because they don't have any other choice. And you can call it a choice, but it's when there are no other options for them. And it's just despicable that we are not granting them the protections that they deserve just to survive, so that we can keep getting cheap meat. It's absolutely not worth it. These people's lives are not worth cheap bacon, period.
So what would you tell people who say, oh, that's terrible, and then they go and they have salami, bacon, a meat hamburger for lunch or dinner?
I'd say think twice. Before you order, think about where that came from. Did somebody get sick? Did somebody die to bring that to your plate? And if so, is it really worth it? Think about other options. Try something new. It's really hard for us to break the habits and to do something that's out of our normal routine, especially when it comes to food. I get it. People are used to eating the same things. It's hard to try new and different foods. But this is the time to do it. This is the time to do it. And if there's one good thing that can come out of this, it's the awareness and realization that there are other options that don't harm animals and that don't harm people. And they're out there. So give them a try.
Absolutely. Because, like, for example, I think we all have a circle of friends where we have some friends who are plant-based and we have some who aren't, and that would include relatives. And so in sending this out and trying to wake people up to this, what I sometimes get back is, yeah, it's terrible all around. Yeah, it's sad, but it's terrible all around. No, there's a distinction. There is a distinction. Yes, there are heroic people risking their lives to go into hospitals and to take care of people who have COVID-19. They are risking their lives to save human beings. It's a very different thing to say these people are going into a slaughterhouse and risking their lives and risking their families' lives in order to produce a product that is not only not essential, but is a leading cause of climate change, habitat destruction, wildlife extinction, water pollution, human lifestyle diseases like heart disease and cancer. That's a totally different thing. And the idea that, for example, some of these Tyson issued a whole big giant campaign in newspapers around the country saying we're experiencing food shortages now. Okay, the food supply chain is breaking. No, the meat supply chain is breaking because animals eat so much more than they produce as food. It's the most inefficient food source. And in fact, it's creating food shortages around the world because if it takes 8 to 25 pounds of grain to make 1 pound of steak, just do the math. Okay, that's very simple mathematics. That means that you could take that grain or the 80% of soy that's fed to farm animals, divert it directly to people, and those people would not starve to death. While we're having a discussion, children are starving to death in the third world. They could eat those soybeans. They could eat that grain, and they could survive. Instead, what we're doing is we're taking it for ourselves, feeding it to farm animals, and it's completely wildly inefficient. So it's really obscene to talk about, well, the food supply chain is breaking. This is a poultry producer who's invited on anytime on Jane Unchained. I would love to talk to Tyson Foods or any of the other big meat companies. And they're trying to confuse the public. And then they say, there's going to be a protein shortage, which is, again, another piece of nonsense when we know that kale has more protein calorie per calorie than steak, that there are many, many vegetables, legumes that are packed with protein, that you don't need to eat an animal to get protein. So what are your thoughts on all of this, Nina?
Well, as soon as you said protein, it just it makes me laugh because it's utterly ridiculous to think that you need meat for protein. And most Americans eat far more protein than they actually need anyway. So the idea that a meat shortage would equal a protein shortage is absolutely ludicrous. There's so many sources for protein that's hardly something that any American should be worried about right now. In fact, they might be looking to reduce their protein instead because too much protein can cause other health issues. And as you said, meat is a cause of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, all these horrible illnesses. So to call it a shortage or a deficit in our diet to not have meat is actually the opposite of reality. The reality is that what we should be doing is eating more plant-based foods to make ourselves healthier and to create, as you were talking about, the more sustainable food supply system that can feed so many more people than an animal-based diet can. All of these resources, yes, the food and also the water that it takes to grow that food. Think of all the pesticides used on those soy crops and other crops that go to feed cattle and pigs and chickens and all these other animals. The amount of waste, the amount of toxic pollution is so vast that we're only hurting ourselves by eating meat.
Not only that, but you've got all and I'll show this, zoonotic diseases. And I'll just go back on you so that then you can cover this. Mad cow disease, swine flu, SARS, which came from a meat market, a live wet market in China, another province. That the COVID-19, most of the experts, virtually all of them, agree that despite the conspiracy theories about labs, it came from a meat market, a live slaughter market in Wuhan, China. Then you've got bird flu, you've got MERS, you've got COVID-19 from a meat market right there. The idea, it boggles my mind that there is such an Orwellian distortion when you say, oh my gosh, there's a food shortage because there's a meat shortage, when the whole coronavirus happened because people eat animals in the first place. And then add this little twist. Here's a headline from the New York Times: obesity linked to severe coronavirus disease, especially for younger patients. Young adults with obesity are more likely to be hospitalized even though they have no other health problems. Okay, so eating the sad American diet, the standard American diet of a burger and a dairy shake is more likely to make you end up in the hospital from COVID-19. So it's just the cognitive dissonance and willful blindness, not just of people, but of the media, refusing to connect the dots. As a journalist, does it frustrate you, Nina?
It is extremely frustrating to see people in the media who are, educated. Obviously, they should know what's going on, the true facts of what's going on, and they choose to focus on this idea of a meat shortage that really doesn't exist, first of all, because we're shipping all this meat to China. So it's not even that there's a shortage of the meat, it's that Americans aren't getting it. But no matter who's getting it, the fact is that this meat is the source of all of these diseases and not just the zoonotic diseases, but as you're saying, the diabetes, all of these things, and the obesity that even makes it worse. Who is covering that? And why aren't they covering that? I mean, is it because it's just not marketable? The advertisers don't want that? I don't know.
Look, you don't, having been in mainstream media for 40 years, approximately 38 years professionally, okay, from the day I graduated college to the day that I officially retired from that industry full-time, 38 years. You don't need somebody to come up and tap you on the shoulder and say, don't cover this. All you need to do is look at the advertising in between your segments. You figure it out real fast. Meat, dairy, pharmaceuticals. Those are the three biggest advertisers, along with an occasional insurance and car commercial. Okay? If you look at cable TV, advertiser-based television, that's what it is. So, it's no shock that they're doing stories now, which, thank God, another journalist in our realm, we're all journalists for animals, climate, and human health, theirturn.net called out CNN the other day for doing a story about the farmers weeping because they had to euthanize their pigs. They had to kill their pigs because they couldn't send them to slaughter. And, what he said was, this is surreal. Hello, they were going to be killed when they were sent to slaughter. Yeah. These weeping farmers, what are they exactly weeping for? And the idea that you could do this story without even, acknowledging that these pigs were going to die anyway, and then call the way they did die euthanasia, which it ain't euthanasia, okay? And he called out the reporter, and I actually retweeted. Go to their turn and retweet it, because I retweeted it with a comment like, "Hello, there is no Santa Claus. Can we get back to planet Earth and think about these farmers are crying. Why are they crying? They castrate the pigs without anesthesia. They rape them into existence. They're not making love in these concentrated animal feeding operations. Torturing animals is not love, and killing them is no kindness. So the idea that they're crying because they can't send them to be killed over here to be eaten, they've got to kill them over here because the slaughterhouses are shut. Some of them are shut down because of COVID-19, and they're just such good-hearted people. They hate to kill them when they kill them anyway. The idea that disconnect, it's almost like there's no words to describe it. And I just know that in every form of oppression we have experienced in history, there are people who romanticize the oppression. We know that happened with human slavery, okay? And now we look at some books that we used to read, like Gone with the Wind, and we say, oh my God, that was romanticizing the oppression of people. That is, a racist trope. And now, as we look at other things that have happened in human history where the oppression is romanticized, sanitized, justified, rationalized, we can see it in the rearview mirror of history. But it's happening right now, Nina Jackal.
Yeah, exactly. And history, I believe, will favor our perspective and not the oppression. But until that happens, we have a long way to go. We have to get the word out and help the general public understand the reality, because it's very different than the reality that the mainstream media is giving them. No, it's not devastating that an animal is killed one way versus another, that it's depopulated versus shipped off to a slaughterhouse to be hit with a bolt gun and then sliced up. So yeah, I will have to read that and absolutely share it, that post.
Here,
um,
I'll read it for you right now because I pulled it up. Their Turn is run by my dear friend and incredible journalist and activist and documentary filmmaker, Donnie Moss in New York. He
yeah,
says, these farmers weeping about having to kill their beloved pigs due to meat plant closures act as though they don't know that their pigs are killed in slaughterhouses. The disconnect is surreal, and shooting them is humane euthanasia, ? Help at Gary Tuckman, CNN. There it is. Theirturn.net. Okay. So we can reply to that with a comment. And it's gotten 46 retweets, but I definitely think that it deserves a comment.
mhm.
It's, there's a point, at which you have to say, dear God, uh, you know, hello, let's get back to planet Earth. And here's somebody else. I thought the exact same thing as I watched farmers crying about having to kill 2 pigs who are destined to much worse deaths on their way to and during slaughter every day for generations. A complete disconnect, and humane euthanasia's methods are shooting, gassing, or worse. So people are responding, and we need to jump on this because we need to call out this romantic, this romance story, this fairy tale. We know that at a slaughterhouse near downtown LA, they have pictures of happy pigs romping and rolling in grass, all painted, a mural painted all around the slaughterhouse. And then you see the actual pigs come in and they're terrified and they're often bloodied and there's foam coming out of their mouths and their babies looking in your eyes. I defy anyone. I defy anyone to go to that slaughterhouse and bear witness with the Save movement and watch those pigs going into that slaughterhouse and tell me that this is okay. And let me tell you how I know. I invite people regularly. Do I really long to go? No. It's very difficult to go, and it leaves me depressed, and the stench covers my whole body and clothes and hair. But I do invite pre-vegans to go. And I was going to take this couple, and the wife wanted to go, and then she called me at the last second. My husband can't go. He thinks he's going to get sick. And yet the husband continues to eat animals and considers himself, a good, upstanding, humane person. So let somebody else do my killing for me. And now they are going to their deaths potentially as they do that killing, because the slaughterhouses have become coronavirus hotspots where thousands of the slaughterhouse workers are infected, then potentially, obviously, going home and infecting their friends and neighbors and relatives. Let them do that. Let them die. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to acknowledge it. I want to pretend it's not happening. I want to pretend that bacon comes from bacon trees and pat myself on the back about what a wonderful person I am. This is happening by the billions around the world. The billions around the world. People who are told it's okay. You don't have to acknowledge that suffering. Nina Jackal.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true. And I think most people don't want to harm animals. They don't want to think that they're participating in animal cruelty. And the only way to really do that is to turn the other way and to refuse to acknowledge it. And that's just the coping mechanism. Fortunately, enough people are starting to pay attention that we do see a shift happening, which is why we see the rise of Beyond Meat and Impossible, and all of these alternatives. So I think we're improving in that area. I think more people are starting to become willing to face the reality of it, but we do have a long way to go. The only way a good person can continue to eat meat is if they blind themselves to the origins and to the suffering, and to what actually happens to that animal. And what I find interesting is that so many of these people that absolutely abhor the dog meat trade in Asia and elsewhere, and the cat meat trade as well, and talk about, you know, how barbaric that is. Um, at the same time, you know, we'll go eat a bacon cheeseburger as soon as they've just, you know, slammed another culture because they're killing dogs. And I think there's a disconnect there as well, that, you know, certain animals are okay, or we just can kind of ignore the suffering that happens to them. Whereas if it's happening in another culture to a different animal, well, then we can speak out about it and feel superior to them, for some made up reason, just to make ourselves feel better.
Here's my question to you. You have your finger on the pulse of our movement. Are we breaking through? Here's my philosophy that keeps me going. I believe in the law of unintended consequences. And I use the example of, you know, horses. Now, horses are facing many threats. The Bureau of Land Management, which is controlled by the meat and dairy industry, is out to destroy and exterminate all the horses, the wild horses on public lands. Even though we have a Wild Horse and Burro Protection Act that's supposed to protect them, they've gotten around that, and that's a horror show. But in general, when you talk about carriage horses, okay, for, you know, hundreds of years, people used horses as a vehicle of transportation, and there were movements to end the carriage horse trade. There were efforts, and all of a sudden something came along called the electric car, and that did more than all the demonstrations in one fell swoop. So that now, even though we do have occasional, this is from Chicago, still, which is now banning horse-drawn carriages.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, here's a picture from New York City of a horse down. Here's another situation where a poor horse in New York City has been, you know, these flight animals who get spooked, dodging traffic. It's so barbaric and medieval. But the vast majority of horses used for transportation, it's not happening anymore in the world because the car came along. Do you see COVID-19 as that same kind of change maker for our eating, our culture of what we eat?
I think that it is a big stepping stone. Will it take us all the way there? No, nobody. I mean, the world won't turn vegan overnight, but I think that this can give us an incremental leap ahead of where we were before. People are paying attention. And the fact that this disease is spreading in slaughterhouses just gives more legitimacy to the idea that animal agriculture, keeping animals captive in confined spaces, is dangerous to humans. And things like this have happened before. Actually, when my husband stopped eating meat, it was because of mad cow disease, back when Oprah exposed that. And I think a lot of other people did too. So I think this is another one of those moments where we can make great strides and get people to pay attention, get people to change their minds and change their habits. And like I said, it's not going to be instant, but it's a very important step that I think we need to take advantage of right now while people are paying attention, to say, hey, there are alternatives. It doesn't have to be like this. There are so many things that you can eat that will be better for your health, better for the planet, better for the animals, could possibly help stop the next pandemic. So give those foods a try. Give the veggie burgers a try. And now's the time when people are more susceptible to it, because, I mean, to be honest, the thought of eating a coronavirus bacon cheeseburger, even if I ate meat, how appealing does that sound? And I know people still are, but it has to
scare me to touch the packaging. That's for sure. If meat packers are coming down with coronavirus, and we know that it can survive on plastic, why would you? I'm afraid to open any packages. I mean, I take them with gloves and I put them in a back room and I wait for a couple of days before and they're not from a meat packing plant that has got a coronavirus infection. They're just, whatever I've ordered that I need. I'm only ordering what I need these days. So I think, yeah, it's causing people, look, it's like, if you don't do it for the animals, if you don't do it for the climate, if you don't do it for your own health, lifestyle health, like to prevent heart disease and cancer, et cetera, then do it to prevent yourself from getting COVID-19. Or do it because you're a decent person who doesn't want to see workers dying so that you can have a non-essential product. No matter what the administration says about it's an essential product, we all know it isn't. Yeah. And we've got to break that. Now, I interviewed a union worker, and she represents some of the slaughterhouse workers. And one of the reasons why they continue to describe their workers as essential is that's the only way that they can have a chance to get the PPE, the personal protective equipment. If they acknowledge that they're not essential, then they'll truly just, so
that's a travesty.
Yeah, it's a no-win situation for these workers. They've now, because of the edict of the Trump administration, that these industries have to continue because they're essential. He made that up. They're literally, they don't have recourse. They don't have legal recourse that others would, and they're immigrants. There is a reason why there are the vast, overwhelming majority of people in slaughterhouses killing animals are immigrants. The union worker I talked to, she said there's 30 languages spoken. 30 languages spoken in the slaughterhouse. And what did they do? They put up the sign in English, and and nobody saw it. So a few people saw it. So the idea that Americans can't do this, that's something that Americans need to look at. If it's okay, if there's nothing wrong with it, if, as people say to me all the time, it's a personal choice, leave me alone, it's a personal choice, why don't you try going into a slaughterhouse and doing this work, even for one day, even for 5 minutes, even looking at the pigs going into the slaughter. If you can't do that, then do not tell me it's just a personal choice. Driving the wrong way on the freeway is a personal choice too. It's not a good one, but anything we do is a personal choice.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a personal choice to a certain degree, but if you want to make good personal choices and ethical personal choices, then you need to look at the facts and look at how the workers and the animals are treated, and make your choice based on that information, not just based on what might taste good right now.
Yes. Well, I think that this is a great conversation, and we just hope that those who are open-minded hear it and listen to it. And by the way, you said your husband went vegan because of the whole Oprah situation. I did too.
Really?
Yeah, it was about 23 years ago. I was a local news anchor at a TV station here in LA, and I was working at Paramount Studios. That was where our studio was. And Howard Lyman came in. He was the cattle rancher turned vegan animal activist who went on Oprah and revealed the horrors. And then she famously said, "That just stopped me cold from eating another burger." That was her quote. And then the cattlemen sued her, and she had to move her show to Texas for a while to fight that. And it was a big hullabaloo. And he had his 15 minutes of fame, the Mad Cowboy, as he came to be known. And he came into the studio. I interviewed him. I was a vegetarian. And afterwards, he and his publicist came up to me in my cubicle, and they said, "We hear you're a vegetarian." And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Do you eat dairy?" And I kind of hung my head, because he had just told me about, the babies ripped from their mothers, and dead piles of calves when they don't need the boys, and all of this. And I said, "Yes." And then they both pointed their finger right at my nose like that. And they said, "Liquid meat." And I went vegan right at that moment. And that was about 23. I wish I had the exact date. It was approximately 23 years ago. And, that's why when they say don't confront people, now some people don't respond well to confrontation. I do. I thank them every time I see either one of them. I say, thank you for confronting me and waking me up. Because if you had been oh so very polite and you had just said, maybe you should consider eliminating dairy from your diet, it might have gone unnoticed. They confronted me. It was like an intervention. And at that moment, I had a moment of clarity and I went vegan. And a month later, I used to love cheese. Somebody put cheese in my salad. I spat it out because my taste buds had reverted back to their natural state in that month. That's why rehab is usually at least 28 days. It takes about 28 days to transition. So I don't come from up here. I wasn't born vegan, but when somebody hit me with a truth bomb, the way they did it, it made me wake up. And that's all we're asking people is just wake up for your own survival so we don't have another one of these pandemics. I mean, these are zoonotic diseases. We're asking people, save yourself, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, save yourself, save your family, save your community, save the economy that we all need to survive. Right now, there's a 15% unemployment rate. Why? Because of animal abuse, pure and simple. That's where it came from.
Wow.
And people who are protesting open back up or this or that, regardless, this whole situation was born from animal cruelty and humans holding animals captive when they shouldn't be. And so then to call animal captivity an essential service, it's mind-boggling. I don't personally understand how. I do understand how, because it has to do with big business and it has to do with money. Take that out of the equation, though, and it's just horrifying.
You have been listening to Lady Freethinker. Please sign up to get her amazing email blasts. In a click or two, you can save animals. It's so easy. She has incredible writers. They do incredible stories, and you can be part of the solution. Literally, when I get your emails, I just go click, 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 boom, boom, boom. I've signed a bunch of petitions, and I know I've done something for these voiceless animals. So your Lady Freethinker is awesome. I love what you're doing. It's just amazing.
Well, thank you so much, Jane. Thank you so much for signing the petitions. It means so much. The more signatures we get, the more effective we are. And I really appreciate that.
All right. Well, carry on. This has been Jane Unchained Live Talk with Lady Freethinker, a.k.a. Nina Jackal. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.